sir. Welcome to COASTER-net Uncut.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of COASTER-net Uncut. I'm, of course, Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois. Now, Danny, we are on the European vacation here, and this next park that we're going to talk about tonight is one of the ones that I think most people have been waiting for from the very beginning, from the very outset of this. They want to know all about Europa Park. Now, Danny, this place is huge, right? This is a huge place. So I think you got an interesting way to try and tackle how to talk about some of these dark rides, some of these flat rides, some of the roller coasters. So why don't you give us a little bit about Europa and how we're going to do it tonight?
So it is huge in terms of the complex. It is not huge in terms of the theme park and how much land it covers. The park itself is actually fairly compact. It is difficult to navigate for a first-timer because there are rides and buildings and themed things all over. You definitely have to use a park map to navigate this place. And what I will say, and I'm gonna give credit to our friend Drew from In the Loop. I will describe this place the way that he described it. Phantasialand, I talked about from the very beginning when we did the very first show here, months ago, I think at this point. Phantasialand is themed absolutely to the nines. Every square inch of that park is themed. Phantasialand is themed more than Europa Park. Europa Park is much more tastefully done and is, in my opinion, is better in the sense that it feels real. Phantasialand, when I'm walking around the Deep in Africa section where Black Mamba is, I don't believe that I'm actually in Africa because I know Africa doesn't look like that. I know that it's way over the top. It's almost too much at Phantasialand, and all areas of the park are like that. At Europa Park, when I'm walking through the area around Blue Fire and the Whale Splash Battle and Wodan Timber Coaster, I feel like I'm in an Icelandic village. When I'm walking through the Spain area of the park and I go to ride the Christopher Columbus flat ride, I feel like I'm in a small little hamlet in the country of Spain. That sort of thing. When I'm in the little Italian village where their Haunted Mansion style ride is, I feel like I'm in a little Italian street. It feels real to me. It feels more immersive in the sense that it transports me to the place where I'm supposed to be, as opposed to just doing everything it can look like it's just stuff from there, if that kind of makes sense. So Phantasialand themed more, Europa Park themed more tastefully, and in my opinion, immersive in the sense that it makes you believe that everything that you're seeing is real, as opposed to Phantasialand. I felt like I was at a theme park that was trying to be something other than what it was. Whereas Europa Park, I really felt like I was in the little individual countries. And some of the lands are not that big. Some of the lands are very small and they're not very large and expansive, which I think is some of the brilliance here, because 1 minute you can be in Iceland, the next second you can be in Russia, and you can walk a few steps here, and then you're in France, and then you're in Germany and Italy, and it really gives you a little bit of a taste of all of Europe, but it's not so overwhelming with one thing, which I think is something I did not expect. I expected all these lands to be very expansive and to feel like it felt like it took forever to ride everything, because it does. We got into the middle part of our second day and we're riding rides that we still hadn't ridden. But because we spent 2 full days at the park. But I feel overall, when you think of the hotels, which I'll get into, and everything, and the restaurants, and the whole Europa Park experience as a whole was everything I could have asked it to be. And I'll explain that in detail as we go along here. But the park itself was very different from what I thought it was going to be. I expected it to feel big and corporate and just, sort of in your face with certain things, and it wasn't. It had the feel of a small park that doesn't have 5 to 6 million visitors every year. It didn't feel like a Disney World or a Universal Studios in that sense. It felt almost sort of like a Holiday World or a Busch Gardens in the quaintness of it in a lot of areas, which took me by surprise. But I like that sort of a feel in my theme parks, just from an atmospheric standpoint. So from that point of view, it was everything I could have hoped for and even more, because it took me by surprise. Let me talk first about the hotel. We stayed at the Hotel Coliseo, they have several different themed hotels. The Hotel Coliseo, which is themed to the Roman Colosseum. Super, super cool. It's a semicircular type hotel. And even upon arrival, the night before our first day in the park, there was just a sense that we were in for something. So we're walking around and we see projection show starting at 9:00 in the courtyard. So you walk out into the courtyard of your semicircular Roman themed hotel, and the hotel forms like 3/4 of a circle. And what fills in the gap of the last quarter? A grandstand that looks exactly like the Roman Colosseum, where people are sitting and, they have flames at the top. They have the torches at the top of the grandstands, and everybody just standing in the courtyard for a 20-minute projection show that is projected on the outside of the hotel in the courtyard. And it's not just a projection show. It's World of Color-esque fountains in the middle part of the courtyard. And then live dancers come out and actors, and it's an actual performance. And this is the night before we go into the park. This is how we started our Europa Park experience. And you can go over to the carts and get a beer or a drink or a cider or whatever might please you. And then what do? After the show is over, which was spectacular, it was incredible. We go up to the penthouse floor of the hotel, and just a massive restaurant and bar with all sorts of food and drink options. I had a Wodan mixed drink, which I forget what was in it. It was a couple months ago now, but they had drinks named for all their big roller coasters and all their big rides, and just endless food and drink options, and it was just incredible. This was our first night there at the hotel. I mean, we had left Tripsdrill just a few hours before this. Our dinner at the second night was at the hotel next door, which was the Hotel Bell Rock, which is a New England theme hotel complete with a lighthouse and decorations. It actually transported me back to my childhood when we used to vacation on Martha's Vineyard every summer. It was very reminiscent of that. They're opening up a new water park, Rulantica. I'm not sure if it's open just yet, but that was the theme of the projection show. It was a ocean themed projection show, which then sort of talked about how their water park was getting ready to open up. So that's the out-of-park experience, and I certainly didn't do it justice there, but the restaurants and the hotels are absolutely gorgeous. It's just everything translates from the park to the hotels to the entry experience. Even walking through an underground tunnel to get to the park entrance is themed. Just sort of really transporting you to this different universe, which we always talk about how Disney and Universal, even through the hotels, a lot of times, it feels like you're someplace else other than where you are. And that entire experience was taken to the hotels, and it really felt like for 2.5 days we were not at a theme park. We were just somewhere else that wasn't even a real place. So I'll preface everything I'm saying with that, because that was how we were greeted, and that was our arrival experience at the Europa Park complex. And it is a complex. It is a huge complex out there in the German countryside. And there's housing and whatnot in Roost there, but it is beautiful. So the way I'm going to attack actually talking about the rides and attractions now that I've set the stage with just our initial first impressions of the place. I'm going to go through alphabetically the different lands, and I'm going to hit on the big rides that are in each of the lands that are not coasters, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the roller coasters. I will preface the roller coasters with this. They have 13 roller coasters. Mm-hmm. And for those of you who I've talked to about this, and if you've been to Europa Park, you will probably agree with me on this. I do not think the roller coaster collection by itself could compete with a Cedar Point or even like a Six Flags Magic Mountain or, some of your big roller coaster parks. The roller coaster collection does not compete with a Cedar Point on its best day. This park does not have 13 coasters where 6, 7, or 8 of them are world record breaker, world class, must go ride type of roller coasters. At Cedar Point, you have Steel Vengeance, you have Maverick, you have Millennium Force, you have Magnum, you have Top Thrill Dragster, you have Gatekeeper, you have Valraven, you have Raptor. I mean, you have all these rides that are excellent roller coasters. And then Europa Park is not like that in terms of the coaster collection. Europa Park has 3 or 4 really, really good roller coasters. It's got a strong supporting cast, and then it's got 1 or 2 small kiddie coasters. I would say it's on par with a lot of the collections at the other parks we visited in Europe. In terms of just standalone roller coaster collection, it may not even be the best roller coaster collection on the European trip that we did. You might argue that Walibi Holland had a better roller coaster collection. You might argue that Haida Park, which I spoke absolutely way too many high praise words about Colossus and Fleur de Démon. And I talked about Goliath and Untamed and Lost Gravity at Walibi Holland. You could debate whether or not those collections are better than the coaster collection at Europa Park. Europa Park does not have the best roller coaster collection in the world, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to, because it's everything else that makes Europa Park one of, if not the best theme park in the world. And that's what we're going to talk about here. So let's go through all the themed areas, right? So Adventureland is sort of there, and you're going to notice a pattern here as we go through these. You're going to notice a lot of similarities to the Disney parks. And that is the way that I would describe this to someone who doesn't fully understand what Europa Park is. It really is as if you took Walt Disney World and put in a bunch of roller coasters. And that's really the feel that this park has. It feels like the best of Walt Disney World coupled with some of the best things that you can take from the roller coaster world, and then putting in a hotel experience and a food experience and a customer service experience and combining it all into one grand package.
Well, you can kind of tell that when they built this place that they wanted Disney, that was the model that they were using here.
It was. And as I describe some of the attractions, you will see that is very, very evident, even down to their mascots, which are a male and female mouse. But again, so we walk into our hotel room, and what do we see? There's greeting cards signed by their mascots sitting there on our bed. Just little things. The hotel rooms are gorgeous. Just little things here and there that really brought the whole experience together. So let's start going through the themed areas. Mostly themed to European countries. They have a few one-off areas that are, a little bit off of that theme. So we have Adventureland, right? This is their jungle-themed area, which is themed around a pond in the middle of the park. They have the African Queen, which is their boat ride that goes around. And they also have a raft ride where you can sit on a jungle raft and it goes around the lake there. Austria is home to their log flume, which is through sort of a diamond mine. through the World of Diamonds, it's called. The area there, the Tirler log flume. There is also one coaster in the area, which is the Alpen Express in Zion, which is their powered map coaster. I won't speak on that one too much, but the World of Diamonds that the log flume goes through, the coaster also goes through. So it's sort of this the powered mine train ride through the diamond mine in the mountain. Very, very cool. Gorgeous on the inside, gorgeous theming, absolute top of the charts theming here in this area as well. The coaster actually has a VR option. We did not elect to do it. We wanted to see the ride, going through the themed areas. If it was just an outdoor coaster, then we'd do it. But this had theming in the ride, so we wanted to do that for sure. Definitely a fun set there. In England is sort of a lot of it's actually indoors. They have a laser maze experience here, but the cool part is an indoor area which is themed to all the soccer. Soccer is very big in England, so it's sort of a sports bar type there. It's a dome that looks like a soccer ball, and they have a sports bar with soccer matches on, and their indoor bumper cars are in there, and their bumper cars are shaped like soccer cleats from different countries, and then they have the big inflatable balls that look like soccer balls in the bumper car arena. So while you're bumping around the different soccer cleats, you can also bump around the inflatable soccer balls, which is pretty cool. France is home to a couple of good rides. So in terms of the coasters, this is where the Eurosat Can coaster is, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and the Silver Star B&M Hypercoaster, which we will also talk about. Possibly the standout dark ride of the entire park for me was Madame Freudenreich's Curiosities.
Mm-hmm.
Andy, do you know what this ride is?
No.
I will read it right from Wikipedia. Madame Freudenreich Curiosities, a dinosaur-themed dark ride.
What?
Now, Andy, this is in terms of non-roller coasters, this is one of the most fun rides that we rode, and we rode this ride twice, which is difficult to do. So it's difficult to ride anything twice. I should preface that. So we had 2 full days, and the feedback that we had gotten from talking with different people, and again, another shout out to Drew from In the Loop, because he had been there a few years prior. His feedback and what we found to be the case was all the roller coasters will always have from like a 20 to 50-minute line. There's no fast pass. The capacity of these rides is very good. The operations are very good. That just tells you how many people are at the park every day. They get 5 to 6 million visitors every year, which is close to twice what Cedar Point does. Mm-hmm. So if that gives you sort of an estimate, the fact that most of their rides are 20 to 50, most of their coasters.
Excuse me, Danny, that's Cedar Point before Gold Pass.
Okay, fair enough. So most of their coasters are 20 to 50 minutes max. I don't think I ever saw a wait that was more. I think I saw a 70-minute wait for Silver Star at one point we were there on a Friday and Saturday, so in theory, their busiest days. I think on the Friday, which was a little bit busier than the Friday actually, because the weather was a little bit nicer on the Friday, I think I saw a 70-minute wait for Silver Star briefly, but generally on Friday and Saturday we were looking at 20 to 45-minute waits for the most part on all the coasters. Then all the dark rides are walk-ons, maybe 5 minutes. So the sort of the cadence you get into, because each area most areas have at least one coaster. There's a few that don't have any, and there's a few that have more than one. Iceland has a couple. And then each area has either a dark or scenic ride, maybe 2. I think Italy has 3. But Italy doesn't have a coaster. So generally there's 2 to 3 rides of interest in most areas. And you can typically get into the cadence of, okay, coaster, hit the bathroom, dark ride, get in line for a coaster. Bathroom, dark ride, coaster. And usually to do that is sort of maybe takes you like well, it maybe takes you an hour because and that was sort of the cadence we went to because we were walking around. It was myself, Adam, Sue, our friend Chris. We had joined with different people. So there's typically 4 or 5 of us. So we got into the sort of cadence where we would queue up for a coaster and wait 30 to 40 minutes maybe for the coaster. And then we would do a dark ride or 2 that were nearby and then move on to the next country. And then you find a bathroom on the way. That's kind of the way that we attack the park. And we got mostly everything done the first day. We had a few residuals that we knocked out early on the second day, and then we're able to do some rerides. So now that I've sort of explained the game plan of how we attack this, Madame Freudenreich's Curiosities. So this is, how can I explain this? It is this old lady, Madame Freudenreich, who has a farm where she takes care of and raises dinosaurs at her home. And you're going through the grounds of her homestead. You're going through her house where there's little baby dinosaurs in the kitchen and they're hiding in the oven and, they're popping out of sinks. And then there's a big birthday party for the one dinosaur and they're all animatronics. There's no screens anywhere in this. This is all live action animatronics. You've got different scents based on what's happening with the dinosaurs. It is absolutely adorable, and I don't know if that's a weird word to use to describe a dinosaur dark ride or any ride for that matter, but it has to be one of the cutest rides I've ever been on, and that's not a word I typically use to describe dark rides, but this is just a fun, makes you laugh, makes you smile type of dark ride, and it is just so weird because you've got smiling animatronic dinosaurs having a birthday party. It's just the weirdest thing. This for you for sure would be this would be your favorite ride there. There is no question in my mind. And this was my favorite dark ride there.
I'm trying to look up the stuff right now to see if I can find. Oh hell, this is real. So, because I'm on Wikipedia. So, what's the best way to follow along with you here?
Okay, so if you're on Wikipedia and you go down to themed areas, I'm just going down alphabetically. So we're in France right now.
I got you.
So I want you to do this right here. Take Madame Freudenreich Curiosities and copy that and paste it into your Google image browser. And just do Google Images and just look at the results there, and you'll get an idea of what's going on here. And I just want to see what your reaction is on this.
Okay.
So copy and paste the Madame Freudenreich Curiosities.
You're not joking. It is very cutesy, isn't it?
Isn't it? It's so weird.
Okay, I wasn't expecting that at all, to be honest with you.
How weird is that? But it's so much fun.
Yeah, it's like the dinosaurs at a tea party and stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And
it's how I can best describe this.
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing. If you're following along, follow along on Wikipedia and check out Madame Freudenreich Curiosities. Boy, oh boy, that was a fun ride. So we'll get back to the coasters there. Let's move on to Germany. We did ride the Elfenfahrt or Elf Ride, which is a sort of an outdoor boat ride through gardens, very beautiful gardens, and there's little elves hiding in the gardens. No, they don't look like me for the Patreon people who like to make that joke. There is some indoor sections to it, but you basically go through an elf garden, which is and these are the type of things that we wanted to experience, right? Like, yes, we're roller coaster enthusiasts, and yes, we want to ride the roller coasters, but Europa Park, more than any other park in the world, is a park that you cannot fully appreciate until you ride all these dark rides and scenic rides, because there's so many of them, right? There's got to be at least 10 to 12 non-roller coaster rides that are rides that you have to go ride when you visit there. I've already named one with Madame Freudenreich, the log flume, that's 2. Elf Ride is certainly one that you want to do. We rode the Voletarium, which is their flying theater, very similar to Soarin' or Soarin' over California. It's sort of like Soarin' over Europe. So if you're a Soarin' fan, this one.
If you're a Soarin' fan, turn off the show. I'm done talking.
Okay, evidently Andy not a fan of Soarin'.
Not at all.
So Voletarium I thought was very, very well done. Enjoyed that one as well. So again, we're already up to like what 4 dark rides here that I've talked about.
Once again, this is straight out of the Disneyland model here.
Yeah.
They have all of those crazy dark rides. With Snow White and Peter Pan and Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Like, there's no shortage of dark rides at Disney. Boat rides, car rides, whatever rides you want. Haunted Mansion. It follows that same model, like you've been saying. Yeah,
no, for sure. Moving on to Greece now. Sort of the headliner in Greece is Aventure Atlantis or Atlantis Adventure, which is their interactive shooting dark ride. Basically, you're going underwater in a submarine and you are shooting all the different creatures, the underwater creatures around the remains of Atlantis for points. A very standard shooting dark ride, all practical effects, no screens, all practical animatronic props here. So again, very impressive and a lot of fun. I actually had a pretty good score. I had a pretty high score in our group, so I enjoyed this one quite a bit for sure. Fluke der Cassandra, which if you watch the Hansa Park show, you will know that Fluke is a curse, so Cassandra's Curse. This is a miniature type version of a Vekoma Madhouse, although I think it might have actually been done by Mock Rides. So for those of you who are, I'll say, oblivious, Europa Park is owned by Mock Rides and is sort of their showroom. So that's why 90 to 95% of the attractions and the roller coasters are Mock Rides, sort of their testing grounds. Mock Rides is across the street. So Cassandra's Curse is sort of your madhouse type ride, and then you have 2 roller coasters as well in Greece. You have the Pegasus, which is just sort of their family coaster, a fun family ride, nothing out of this world amazing, just a strong family ride, and then the Poseidon water coaster. Now they actually have 2 water coasters at Europa Park or from Mock Rides. They have Atlantica Super Splash, which is in Portugal, which we haven't talked about yet, which is very similar to the Journey to Atlantis ride at SeaWorld San Antonio, where it just has the turntables. You do the one drop, the other turntable, and then you go over. You do a speed hill, and then you drop down. It's sort of the up, over, drop, and that's it. Poseidon is much more like the Journey to Atlantis at SeaWorld San Diego, where you've got much more roller coaster to it. Actually, the first half of it is very much a roller coaster and is sort of a dry part of a roller coaster, and then you come down over a speed hill and then into a splashdown pool, and then you do like an honest-to-goodness log flume type section of ride where you're going through remains of ancient Greece, and then you go up a second lift hill, you do the big drop, a speed hill, and then your big splashdown at the end. So it is a couple of distinct parts where there is honest-to-goodness roller coaster to it, there is an honest-to-goodness log flume part of it. This one we rode on Friday while the sun was out and at its peak, so even though we waited about 40 to 50 minutes for it, it was a fun ride and definitely a refreshing ride for sure. So Poseidon and Pegasus, your coasters in Greece. A lot going on in Greece. You've got 2 dark rides and 2 coasters there. So Greece is certainly a place that you spend a lot of time for sure. Grimm's Enchanted Forest is sort of like the walkthrough of your fairy tales. I'm not going to talk too much about that here because that is very much an Efteling thing as well, which we will talk about in the last show here. But Efteling is very fairy tale based. This is very similar where you can walk into different fairy tale buildings, learn the fairy tale stories and whatnot. That is something we passed on for the most part at Europa Park because Efteling had a very similar experience and it's much more expansive at Efteling. Let's go to Iceland. Now, Iceland is home to a couple of coasters. We've got Blue Fire Mega Coaster for sure, and also Wodan Timbur Coaster, which we'll talk about later when we get into the big coaster discussion. And the big dark / scenic ride in Iceland is Whale Adventures Northern Lights, which you like the river battle, the splash battle type rides, like the one that was removed from Dollywood, this is a river battle theme to whale watching boats in Iceland. So a very, very nice theme around the area. We did not ride this for the sake of time. This was sort of and we didn't want to be too wet riding the coasters and walking around, standing in line. And again, for mostly the entire trip was low 70s and a little bit of a breeze here and there. The sun was intermittent most of the time. So we passed on this ride, but we did check it out in terms of, it's right in the middle of sort of the midway there. So we did interact a little bit from the midway part of it with the off-ride water cannons, but did not ride it ourselves. In Ireland, that is sort of their kiddie area where they have a lot of their kiddie type rides. They have one coaster there, the Ba Express, which is their children coaster. Probably the most comfortable kiddie coaster I've been on, probably because of those trains that Mack rides. Mack rides has a knack for making their trains extremely comfortable, and the kiddie coaster land is no exception here. Italy does not have a roller coaster, but they have 3 scenic / dark rides, 2 of which we rode. So the Vola da Vinci is sort of a pedal monorail, a suspended monorail that you actually pedal over the Italian gardens. We passed on that one. We did ride the other 2, Piccolo Mondo, which is a dark ride that sort of takes you through like an Italian pizza place, and it sort of like celebrates the family heritage of going through an Italian family restaurant, which is kind of fun. You see guys twirling pizzas and whatnot, so that's kind of fun. And then the Geisterschlossen, I think, is the translation for it. Geisterschloss, I think it is, which translates roughly to Ghost Castle. And this is the ride that is inspired by the Disney Haunted Mansion. Heavily inspired by Haunted Mansion, very Haunted Mansion-esque. It has the spirit hovering in the crystal ball, right? It even has
with that. Like, that's
what's that?
Like, how do they get away with that? Like, Haunted Mansion's like one of those iconic Disney rides. Like,
I don't know. There's not a whole lot of people who are going to Disney World and Europa Park the same year. But they even have the ballroom where they have the dancers. They have the circular room where the piano is playing. They have a lot of the same trademarks, if you will, of the Disney Haunted Mansion. Even a stretch room pre-show, just like Disney does it, but it has some added special effects, which I won't spoil. Skip ahead 1 minute if you don't want to know about what happens in the stretch room at the Geisterschloss. So, Andy, not only do the lights flicker in the room stretches, right? So the room stretches, the lights flicker, there's lightning and everything. And I'm pretty sure this doesn't happen in the Disney version. Then a body falls from the ceiling that's being hung by a noose after the lightning goes off.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that doesn't happen in the Disney.
and the floor like vibrates and shakes too. So there you go. It's so really, really cool. This was, again, I would say that this was one of my top 2 or 3 dark rides at the entire park. The Geisterschloss Ghost Castle there in Italy. Luxembourg, really, there's not much besides a monorail station there, although this is where the roller coaster restaurant Food Loop is roughly located. It's right next to the Luxembourg train station. So we did eat lunch there on our second day. So Food Loop, you look it up. It is the roller coaster restaurant where you sit around a round table, you order your food on a touch screen, and then your drinks and food and desserts and all that fun stuff are all delivered to you via roller coaster that comes down from the ceiling. So they sort of have the kitchen in the back and they put all the food up top, and then they come down on different roller coaster tracks, and they have little tags based on your seat number to tell you whose food is what. So check out Food Loop at Europa Park if you want to see videos on that. But boy, oh boy, that was a fun experience for sure. The Minimoys Kingdom, which is home of Arthur, the inverted dark ride powered roller coaster. We'll talk a little bit more about that because now that's a ride. So we'll talk about Arthur here in a bit. In the Netherlands, you have a couple of smaller rides. This isn't really a bunch of standout rides in the Netherlands. It's mostly smaller rides and kiddie rides. Going to Portugal, the big ride here is the Atlantica Super Splash, which I described before, is one of the water coasters, which is very much like Journey to Atlantis at San Antonio. Some good theming there, a couple of ships on either side, but really kind of up, over, backwards, down, over a speed hill, and then a big splashdown. Russia, we'll move to Russia and we'll talk about Euromir when we talk about the rest of the coasters, and the Snowflake Sleigh Ride, which I believe is what was it? Schlittenfahrt Schneeflocken, which is sleigh ride snowflake, I believe is the actual literal translation. The Schlittenfahrt Schneeflocken, which is one of their older dark rides, one of their oldest dark rides. It's on the short side, but it's a sleigh ride through the snowy areas of Russia, and it's based around a Russian folktale. Moving on to Scandinavia, which is where fjord rafting is, their big river rapids ride. We did not ride this. This is also where the Pirates of Batavia ride used to be, and where the new and improved Pirates of Batavia ride will be opening soon. I actually don't know what the opening date on that. Maybe it already is. I thought it was a late 2019. But so that's sort of their Pirates of the Caribbean style ride, right? This is the big one that was damaged heavily and destroyed in the fire back in 2018. So we did not get to experience that. That is certainly going to be a highlight for us on a potential return trip in the coming years to experience that, because by many accounts, people say that was their signature dark ride and their top dark ride. So if you certainly throw that into the mix to everything else we've already talked about, that's certainly just another headliner to throw in there. We'll wrap up here with Spain. Spain is sort of where the hotel entrance for the hotel guests. They have a fun little flat ride, and it was actually the very last ride that we rode on the trip was the Columbus Joel, which is a sea storm style ride. So it's sort of like imagine if you had a Music Express, right? But instead of sitting in the square cars, you're in sort of like the boat, the round boats, and you can spin them.
Oh.
So you're going around over the bumps like a Music Express, but you can spin the boat in either direction. So that is the Columbus Joel. And this was one we wanted to end our roller coasters at Wodan Timber Coaster because that was our favorite coaster at the park. So we rode Wodan Timber Coaster and we're walking back to the hotel, getting ready to get our stuff from the hotel storage room and put it on the bus to go back to our hotel in Frankfurt. And we had about 5 minutes till the park closed, and we saw that it was there. And that was sort of a ride that on our list we made was it would be nice to ride, but we'll do it if we have time. And we had time, so we rode it, and it was the last ride we rode. And very, very glad we did. That was definitely a giggle type ride, if you will, there. And then finally, Switzerland is the last area that we really have to touch on before we get to the big coasters. They have the Swiss Bob Run, the Schweizer Bobbin, which I alluded to a little bit in the Haida Park episode. This is your Mack bobsled coaster. Very similar to an Avalanche at King's Dominion. I would say it's probably a little bit better than that one. Maybe not quite as good as the one at Haida Park, which is a little bit faster and a little bit longer, but certainly a fun ride. I really like those bobsled coasters. I think they're a lot of fun, especially the ones where you're in the individual cars, like the mock rides ones, where the trains sort of flex in the middle. That's always kind of fun to do. And also there is Matterhorn Blitz, which is their Wild Mouse coaster, but themed to like Swiss Chalet, which other rides on this trip had a similar theme. But the big standout here, it's actually got, it's basically a clone. If you take a look at the layout is essentially almost a clone of like Ricochet at King's Dominion or Coast Rider at Knott's Berry Farm. It's the version that's got the big drop at the beginning. But instead of a lift hill, it's an elevator. It's a themed elevator. So you enter like the Swiss Chalet building and you go in and you take an elevator ride, and it actually does like the Pilgrim's Plunge type thing where the track tilts because it's on like the curved track on the way up. So just taking a standard Wild Mouse ride and just something a little bit different and unique that you're maybe not expecting, and you get this fun experience out of it. So, we really enjoyed the Matterhorn Blitz as well. All right. So now, and actually, if you're following along on Wikipedia, what you're going to find here is that immediately below all the countries is the actual roller coasters. So why don't we tackle some of these? And I've said enough about some of them already. And I'm really sort of blowing through. It seems like I'm blowing through everything here because there's just so much to talk about, and I don't even know how long we've been recording this. But I'm sure this episode is eventually going to be an hour. But I'm touching on things because there's so much to talk about here, right? Alpen Express, we already talked about. Schweizerbobbin, we talked about. Euromir. So Euromir is really odd, and I don't know how else to describe that. So my understanding of this ride is that at one point, so what it is, there's a big indoor spiral lift while there's like techno Russian music. It's like doom 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 doom. It's themed to the satellite, right?
Yeah.
Space station, Mir, and it's in the Russian area, and it's one of the original Mach Ride spinning coasters. So you're going through this spiral lift hill, and I can't even remember if we spun now on the lift hill because it was a while ago. And we only rode it once. My understanding, and then it goes around the glass towers at height, and it spins while you're going around the glass towers. And then it drops into the actual roller coaster part. My understanding is that at one point in the past, it used to free spin during the roller coaster parts. Mm. It did not for us. So we were sort of locked just going forward. And we were facing people because it's the back-to-back that you're used to on like a Turbulence or a Sierra Sidewinder, that style. So for me, this ride didn't have the out-of-control feeling that some people have said that it seems to have, and I think that has to do with it not free spinning in the coaster part. That's my only guess. We spun at the top.
It's I'm looking at pictures on RCDB, and I can't find a single picture on here that shows the cars in any other position than front. Like, because you would think a picture would show it. Like,
oh yeah, you're right about that.
Like, I can't find a single picture that shows that it would make it look like it's spinning.
No, you're right. I'm going through the pictures myself now, and you're right. And I think the motors to make them spin are actually on the vehicles. I'm not sure on that. So no, I think you're right. I don't see any either there. So maybe that's not correct.
Because I've heard that too. I've heard people say that it used to free spin.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do some more research for you.
So that's a mystery, but I had it free spun during the coaster part. I think it would have really been a standout. But the spinning really just happens at slow speeds when you're going around the glass towers, and then also on the spiral lift hill. So it's like the spinning doesn't add much there as opposed to as much as it would during the coaster part, when some of those airtime hills and turns would be able to take you by surprise. So if there was any coaster if there was any coaster at Europa Park that you could say didn't meet expectations, I guess this would be the one. Just because I was really hoping for that out of control feeling, and I didn't really get that. It was more of just sort of a family type coaster. I was hoping it would have been more of an out of control type ride that you get on like a time traveler, right? Because Time Traveler is this big spinning coaster. I would have hoped to get more of a time traveler feel out of this one, and I didn't. So this is maybe the one coaster that didn't really hit the mark for me at Europa Park. You can't find anything, huh?
I'm on Google Images right now, and I can't find a single one that.
Maybe it never did, and people are just full of shit. I mean, coaster enthusiasts have been known to make stuff up.
No. No.
All right, let's move on to. So I wanted to talk about that one in particular. So we've got Silver Star.
Wait, was it Brian Bass that said it free spun? Because
I believe he was one who might have said such things, Andy.
And Brian Bass needs to produce some sort of evidence of this happening, because I see none on anywhere. I see none whatsoever. Like, because you think somebody would snap a picture where people aren't sitting, arranged
perfectly in a row.
Yeah. At least one picture. Yeah. No. Okay, keep going.
Brian Bass, disappointing again.
Well, it's a real shock there.
So we've got a couple. So we still got Eurosat, Arthur, Wodan, Blue Fire, and Silver Star. I'm going to let you pick. I'm going to talk about Wodan last since it was my favorite ride there. But why don't you pick between Silver Star, Blue Fire, Arthur, and Eurosat? What do you want to talk about first?
Do Arthur.
All right. So Arthur, it's classified as an inverted spinning powered coaster. And so the spinning is pretty much choreographed the entire way. So what happens is you get into essentially 4 cross seats, and you've got speakers, behind you in the vehicle, behind your ears. And it is really 85% a dark ride. Mm-hmm. And there's an outdoor section that goes through like a forest area. But for the most part, it is a dark ride. And it's based around the Arthur IP, which is famous over there. It's very well received by families and kids. It's a very, very strong property, and Arthur takes place in sort of the Minimoys Kingdom is sort of this indoor area with a few other attractions as well. This has to be, in my opinion, this is one of the best all-around theme park attractions that I've ridden in quite some time. Not in terms of thrill factor. It's not an overly thrilling or an overly exhilarating ride, but in terms of getting all the classic feelings that you want to see in a dark ride and a family-friendly type dark ride, this has everything. This has an immersive theme. It's got great animatronics. It's got a good story that it's trying to tell. Even with the language barrier, we understood just based on what was going on with the animatronics and the speakers and even the tones of the voices and the noises and the sounds and the words and what was going on around us. We could tell what was going on and what was supposed to be happening and what was happening. And there's even this crazy part it's like this children's story where Arthur and his family and whatnot, they're going around and they're trying to defeat this Dark Lord guy. I forget what his name is. And then like in the middle of the ride, they go through like it looks like Vegas, like where there's all these flashing lights and techno music, and it's even like there was like rap music or whatever. I forget what song it was. It was a song I recognized playing, but it was the weirdest thing, and it was one of those things that make you wonder like what the hell is going on, and like only in Europe would something like this happen, and it was really, really weird. And then it goes back to the storyline it's trying to tell. And it's just everything on this ride was wonderful. I know Drew from In the Loop, who, again, I'm referencing a lot here because we had a lot of discussions with him about what we thought of Europa. He called Arthur his favorite theme park attraction of all time when he wrote it. I don't know if I would go quite that far, but it is certainly up there in terms of my favorite overall ride experience. And certainly from a non-thrill ride perspective, this is certainly up there. And if you were to consider this purely a dark ride and not a coaster, it's by far the best dark ride they have. And it might be their best overall attraction at the entire park. This was a re-ride for us for sure. This is one that we made sure we rode both days just because we loved it so much. I honestly think that you could have taken this ride system. We talked about the speculation of a ride like this coming to Universal for Harry Potter. Yeah. I think that would have been an absolutely spectacular move. And certainly with Gringotts and Forbidden Journey, and I haven't ridden Hagrid's yet, but the fact that those do have a certain thrill factor to them, you wonder why they didn't perhaps go this sort of route at some point to have a much more family-friendly high-end attraction. If they were to continue to expand the Wizarding World, I would think that this would be an obvious choice of the type of attraction that they would want to put in, because there are absolutely endless possibilities you could do with the pivoting ride vehicles, and you can make people see exactly what you want them to see at the exact time you want them to see it. You can have an immersive experience. You can theme all the way around the vehicles. You can theme the vehicles. You can have onboard audio. You can have a slight roller coaster part if you want to. It's powered in most areas, so you can increase and decrease the speed as you need when you're not in those roller coaster parts. I do not have anything bad to say about this ride at all. It was one of my favorite attractions of the entire trip, and even Coaster Radio last week was doing their poll for Park of the Decade, Manufacturer of the Decade, Ride of the Decade. For non-roller coaster ride of the decade, I voted for Arthur because it was from this from 2010 to 2019. I considered some other rides that I have ridden since then. Certainly like a Transformers was a ride that I considered because
you haven't been on Avatar yet, so
I haven't, and that's fair, and I will give you that. I will certainly give you that. But this was the one that came to my mind. Like, boy, that is just an all around excellent theme park attraction.
Yeah, this is one, like I said, we talked a lot about this one when talking about the Harry Potter ride, because it sure sounded like what they were trying to do would fit what Arthur does a little bit. It fits the inverted thing. You could maybe put a little bit more coaster on it if you wanted to. Yeah. But it also sounds like, they might have missed an opportunity here, because a lot of times with the Hagrid's motorbike, they take you past these big animatronics, but you're still seated forward, and it doesn't really give you that opportunity to face what
this turns you to everything right when you're supposed to, and you are from, at some point you are from me. I could almost reach out and touch them. I mean, I can barely touch my wall right here to the side of me. And at some points you are from me to the wall away from the animatronics. They are right there. And they look good. They look good. A lot of times when you get too close to stuff like that, you see the mechanics and they don't really look that good. They look good. And the ride's only 5 years old, but they've done an excellent job maintaining it through the first 5 years for sure.
Yeah.
So where do you want to go next? Do you want to go to Eurosat, the Can coaster?
Yeah, let's do that one, because this one's an interesting one, because they just redid this.
Yes. So Eurosat was original. That was their indoor coaster. So for the Disney people, this is, even Europa Park has a geodesic dome. that looks like the Epcot Spaceship Earth, except at Europa Park, there's a roller coaster in it, and it's called Eurosat. And for many, many years, Eurosat was considered to be one of, if not their worst coaster. It was considered to be very rough, not fun at all. So we had very low expectations with this, but they just retracted it in 2018. They took out all the track and they replaced it. And an interesting story we had when we were on our tour with some people from Mock Solutions, they actually said the original Eurosat track was all black because why would it need to be any other color? It wouldn't need to be a color because it's in darkness, so it was just black. They painted the new Eurosat coaster red, and they painted it red so they could easily tell what parts of the ride they had already replaced because they had to do it in a certain order because you have all this intermingling track inside the dome. So they painted the new track red. So that doesn't really affect your ride experience. It's just there. So Brian Bass, I know, was a big fan of Euromir and hated Eurosat, but I enjoyed the hell out of Eurosat Can Coaster. So you're in a family style vehicle, very similar to like a Fire Chaser Express. So if you're similar, it's a very similar seating arrangement, and you go through a spiral lift hill. And again, you can fast forward maybe a minute or two if you don't want any spoilers, but you go through the spiral lift hill, which is through the middle of the geodesic dome, if I understand correctly, the way the ride is set up. So you go through the middle drum, and inside the middle is, black light, ultraviolet, French type architecture on just a wall. It's just like a painting, really, if you will. It's not real. It's sort of just like a not a cardboard cutout that makes it sound cheesy, but it's like black light. But then as you get farther up the drum, the housing, it's actually a giant black light, glow-in-the-dark Eiffel Tower. So you've got the Eiffel Tower rotating as it basically pushes you up the spiral lift hill, right? And so you get to the top, and there's stars and whatnot. So it's like you're in a starry Paris night, and you've got the Eiffel Tower right there. And you can do VR on this as well. We did not. Once again, and there's onboard audio as well. So what you do when you get to the spiral lift hill, you drop into the roller coaster part, and it's sort of like a Space Mountain type experience. You've got some drops, you've got some turns. It actually has a couple of good airtime moments in it, which were quite surprising in the dark. And it says that its max G-force is 4. There were some intense parts of it. Top speed is 37 miles an hour, so it's not overly fast. But again, Space Mountain isn't overly fast. But when you're in the dark and you're doing these tight maneuvers, it certainly seems a lot faster. And of course, it's now Eurosat Can Coaster, and it's in the France area. So what is the onboard audio playing the entire time while you're doing the roller coaster? The whole entire time it's playing the Can. And then so you're going through these turns, you're going over the airtime hills, and then finally you do like a helix at the end. And then you come into like the final turn in the straightaway, and it's like the dun 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 dun. And what are you going underneath? You're going underneath the Can Girl's legs that are going up and down as you come into the brake run. And that's how it finishes, right? So this was certainly a great surprise, considering such the negativity that this ride seemed to have for years. It certainly seems like the refurbishment and the retracking was definitely worth the wait.
So you didn't do the VR though?
We did not do the VR.
Because the VR is based on Valerian?
Yes, the VR is Valerian.
Oh, that's interesting.
So we didn't do that. So it originally had a space theme, and then it changed over to this actual Can Moulin Rouge type theming. And so we enjoyed it so much, we rode it a second time on our second day, and we didn't do the VR either time. It seemed to be a bit of a process. You had to go to a separate booth and get your VR, and then you had to get like a reserve time and whatnot, and we weren't really interested in doing that so much.
It kind of says that you might have to pay to do the VR too.
You do.
Okay.
Now we had, with our package that we got with our tickets and hotels, we got a coupon to do the VR on the other one, the Mine Train.
Okay.
But we didn't want to do it there because a lot of it was indoors and it went around the diamond mine. So we could have done that one for free, and we elected not to. So we did not do any of the VR at either of these. They used to have VR on the Pegasus coaster too. I think that's where they tested it before they started rolling it out to the other ones. But very, very much enjoyed the Eurosat Can coaster. I would argue that that's probably their fourth best coaster at the park after, well, Arthur notwithstanding, in terms of pure roller coaster, because Arthur may be their best attraction overall. But Eurosat would be fourth on the coaster list, at least after these last three here, which are Blue Fire, Silver Star, and Wodan. Let's talk about Blue Fire. So Blue Fire and Silver Star, I had ranked right next to each other in my most anticipated list, and I had Blue Fire one step ahead of Silver Star. I liked Silver Star better, and that might be a surprise, and it's not necessarily that I was disappointed in Blue Fire, because I wasn't. I very much enjoyed Blue Fire. I was really surprised at how good Silver Star was. And, it's interesting, right? Because you hear people say a lot of bad things about Silver Star, right? But then that's made the Thrilling 32 several times when rides like Diamondback and Apollo's Chariot and Nitro have recently been left out of the Thrilling 32. Diamondback was out, Nitro was out, Apollo's Chariot was out, and Silver Star was in last year. So, I was sort of puzzled by all that and be like, well, everyone says bad things about Silver Star, but the voters are telling us it's good. So I'm really
It looks a lot like Mako.
It is a lot like Mako. It's very much like Mako. And oddly enough, Silver Star to me was a back row ride. We rode a Silver Star in the back row, and it was very, very good. I would say it's certainly in the top half of my B&M hypercoasters. It's very much like a Mako to me, for sure. Boy, oh boy, oh boy! I really, really enjoyed Silver Star. Let's talk about Blue Fire a little bit. So mock launch coaster, same style as like a Copperhead Strike. For the American folks who are familiar with that style ride now, Blue Fire is not nearly as compact as Copperhead Strike. I don't even think, in terms of length, it might be roughly the same length. I'm actually not quite sure. Blue Fire length is 34.64. So let's see what Copperhead Strike is, just out of curiosity. 32.55. So similar in length. Now Blue Fire has a dark ride portion at the beginning, where you're going through like the ice chambers in the Iceland area, where they're sort of experimenting with Blue Fire and figuring out what this new energy source is. I think is kind of the idea behind it. The launch, much like we talked about how on Flug von Novgorod from Hansa Park had a 0 to 62 mile an hour launch in 1.5 seconds. This is 0 to 62 in 2.5 seconds. So it's not as powerful as a launch as some other rides. It's still a good launch, and you get some good speed. You also get some weird sensations at the top of that sort of turn thing at the top of the launch. It's not really an overbank turn. It's like a weird hill that's on its side. The big vertical loop has a little bit of hang time in it, which is really, really nice. It's not overly powerful in terms of the positive G forces. I mean, you enter it, you get some good positive Gs in the entry, you get a little bit of hang time at the top, then you get some more positive Gs, then you go into this whippy high-speed turn, which is really good. You get some good air time popping up onto the mid-course brake run. You drop down, and then you enter sort of the Maverick-style twisted horseshoe roll, which is fun. It's very Maverick-like in that regard as well. You sort of pop out of your seat a little bit if you're in the front or in the middle. In the back, you sort of get whipped through it a little bit more. It's got a nice near miss with the rock formation on the second half of that. So those corkscrews are a lot of fun. You get a little bit of float, a little bit of pop there. And then you sort of do this turn and you pop over this airtime hill, some good floater airtime there. It's not really insane ejector airtime or anything there. It's just a little bit of floater air. You do a nice little turnaround, and then comes for me what is actually the highlight of the ride, which is the barrel roll at the end. The barrel roll is not like, it's not really taken at a leisurely pace. It's actually taken with quite a bit of amount of speed, and you get thrown out of the barrel roll, and you get thrown from your seat into the restraint. And you fall out of your seat, and you are thrown out of your seat, and then you do a final turn, and then you come into the brake run. The Blue Fire, to me, saves its best trick for last in that barrel roll. Everything else up into that point is not overly intense. A lot of mock rides are not overly intense. It's not extremely forceful. Some people make the comparison to Maverick. I don't think that's a fair comparison. It's not intense like Maverick is. It's not insane balls to the wall speed and whatnot like a Maverick is. Blue Fire is a fun, well-rounded, enjoyable roller coaster that I think is very, very re-rideable. And I sort of joke around sometimes, when people say re-rideable, that means it's not intense. And I think that's a fair statement on Blue Fire. It's not overly intense. It doesn't have gray out. It doesn't have a ton of gray out moments and intense positive G forces. It doesn't have a ton of ejector airtime. It's got a few spots of good airtime. It's got the barrel roll, which really throws you out of your seat. It's not overly excessive in terms of lateral forces. There's a few spots where it throws you to the side a little bit and you get a little bit of an out of control feeling, but it is not a balls to the wall trying to kill you type of ride like Maverick often feels like. I don't even know if I would say that it's as intense as Copperhead Strike. I mean, Copperhead Strike is a very intense, compact ride. I think Copperhead Strike, a lot of its intensity, and we've talked about this a little bit, Copperhead Strike gets a lot of its intensity and force from the fact that it is very compact and it's got some agility and it's very tight. Blue Fire is not a tight ride. It's a more expansive ride. It covers more land. It does not have the tight, close together elements. It has more drawn out, very deliberate type elements like the big loop and the horseshoe roll. It's just a very different rhythm from a ride like Maverick or even like a Copperhead Strike. I would almost say if you had Time Traveler not spin, I kind of feel like we talked about, hey, if Copperhead Strike had spinning cars like Time Traveler, it would be a lot better. I feel like Blue Fire Mega Coaster is a lot like what Time Traveler would feel like if it didn't spin. I feel like that's the best comparison that I can kind of give you because Time Traveler has the big loop. It's got the big sweeping turns. It's got sort of the corkscrew that it takes at a leisurely pace. It doesn't whip through any of its elements. So I sort of feel like that's the comparison I would make there. I think it's a very enjoyable ride. It's a very strong ride. It is a good headlining ride for sure. I do not think it's the best ride there. I think that Silver Star is a little bit better, and I think Wodan is my favorite roller coaster at the park. But Blue Fire Mega Coaster, for me, being the third best coaster there, is more than an acceptable and a very enjoyable number 3 at the park. We rode this. This was the coaster we rode the most out of any of them in the park. I think we rode this 4 times altogether on the entire trip, and we rode Wodan 3 times. We were allowed to go up the exit after our tour with them because they gave us a tour of the backstage area of Blue Fire, and they let us ride without waiting in the line, which was very, very nice of them. So this was a ride that I very, very much enjoyed. And you seem like you have thoughts or questions.
Well, part of my thing here is that this is one that people like to talk about a lot too. So you wonder sometimes, about, where people get ideas from, and maybe because Blue Fire is not a new coaster, right? Like Blue
No,
Fire,
2009, I think.
yeah. So it's been around for 10 years now. I think you're right in
In
saying that.
2009, this was definitely a holy crap. This is an awesome ride. Now I think it's still an awesome ride. It's a great ride. I think it's just really it's really a good number 3. It's a good supporting higher end supporting coaster.
Yeah. Because it seems like this one especially, it hasn't stood the test of time really. That when people talk about this one, and we've seen it in the Thrilling 32, we've seen it drop significantly over time. Where when we first started this,
This was a top 20 ride.
Yeah, top 20. It was in the top 10 sometimes, right? Like what?
I think it was in the top 10 one year.
Like you're talking about a top tier ride, and on the flip side, conversely, Maverick not in the top 10 in those same discussions. So you see attitudes changes, and maybe that's just a matter of us getting more people voting over time. And maybe this isn't one of the most forceful rides out there, and maybe it isn't a top tier ride, a fun ride nonetheless, I would assume.
Yeah.
But my own experience with Mac coasters is Time Traveler. If that didn't spin, it would be pretty disappointing. I thought Copperhead this year was a little underwhelming at points. Like it had some really good elements, and then it had some real underwhelming stuff.
Time Traveler is better than Blue Fire. Generally, that is the consensus from the people we spoke to. Blue Fire is not as good as Time Traveler,
which is kind of crazy to me because Time Traveler is like it's a good ride. I have it in my.
I don't think it's too far off.
It's my mid-20s, so to say that it's worse would probably put Blue Fire, lower than that.
I would categorize for someone like me, I would say that Blue Fire's in like a top 50 discussion for someone who's been on hundreds and hundreds. I mean, some of the rides that I have ranked in the same area, like a Time Traveler, I have a little bit higher. Even like a Verbolten, Lost Gravity, which was a similar ride that we rode earlier in the trip. I have the single rails ranked a little bit lower than Blue Fire. So I don't know if that's a good indication. Also, a ride that I have slightly below Blue Fire is Powder Keg, to try and compare a similar type ride. So I would say you're kind of looking in between so to take 2 rides at Silver Dollar City, I think it would kind of be in between like a Time Traveler and a Powder Keg.
Okay. Interesting. So, and maybe because as you're talking about this, and you kind of made the point earlier on, is that this is like a Mac testing ground for a lot of their coasters and stuff. And maybe to some extent, maybe that's what's holding Europa Park back, is not having that diversity of roller coaster. You have the one V&M coaster in Silver Star there. But all the rest of them are Mac rides, and maybe they need something else. Maybe they need a different company to come in to make that coaster collection more impressive. That obviously everything you've said up to this point, Dark Ride's pretty great. Overall feel of the park pretty great. But so far you haven't talked about a roller coaster that I'm like, yeah, that's somewhere I really need to go. To say that Silver Star is as good as Mako or right in that same group, well, I can just go ride Mako. All these other coasters, there's not really anything here that really leaps off the page to me that says that, hey, this is a place that you really, really need to go to. Maybe your discussion of Wodan here changes that, though I suspect it doesn't.
Well, and again, and this is why I prefaced this show with, at the very beginning, I said this roller coaster collection could not compete with Cedar Point on its best day. It just doesn't. It's not a roller coaster park.
Danny, you're going to get me started here. You're going to get me started because everything you've talked about is Dark Ride, Dark Ride, Dark Ride, Dark Ride. And all the dark rides, you're like, oh, well, this one's a little bit older. This one's based on this. This one's based on that. At the end of the day, can I not just go to Disneyland and get this same experience? Like you said, Haunted Mansion's the same damn thing. It's this other one. They still have a working Pirates of the Caribbean ride. If roller coasters isn't what's selling this park, like if all these dark rides are selling this park and the experience, I feel like I can just go to Disney and get these same experiences if I'm not looking for roller coasters. And by the,
well, if you're not looking for roller coasters, I mean, if you wipe all the roller coasters out of Europa Park, you would be hard pressed to find a lot of differences between Europa Park and Disney. You really would. And to some extent, what you're saying is true.
But here's the mind-boggling part to me. So this is the part that I can't get over. And it's the people that vote in different things and they tell me that Europa Park's this amazing place will be the same people that sit there and take a big steaming pile of shit onto Disney.
And that's the problem I have. Now, I'm going to sit here, and you're absolutely right about that.
You throwing in mediocre roller coasters into Disney doesn't automatically make that the greatest place on earth. It was already that. You putting mediocre roller coasters into a place like that doesn't change the dynamic for me. It doesn't. I don't know if mediocre is quite the right word. Everything you've said to me, Silver Star is a Mako.
That's not mediocre. Come on now.
Well, Mako's a top 35 ride for me. Like, I'm not going to go travel to go ride Mako. Like, I can go ride Mako.
Well, I'm not saying that.
I've been on Mako. I can find a better Mako over Georgia and ride Goliath and have a lot more fun than that. So to me, if Mako's your best ride at a park, you're basically SeaWorld. It's just not, you're not selling anything to me. And me having my own personal experiences with Mack rides with Copperhead and Time Traveler, like Blue Fire's not really like making me stand up. And you like the Arthur experience, and that's great, but I can go to Disney World and go get the Avatar experience. And it's not the same type of ride system, but it's a great experience.
Well, and I think most of the things you're saying here are valid. But at the same time, what you're taking is you're saying, well, if I want, Haunted Mansion and all this stuff, I can go to Disney. And if I want, Copperhead Strike or Time Traveler, I go to Silver Dollar City or Carowinds. And if I want Mako, I go to SeaWorld. And if I want Wodan Timber Coaster, I can go to Worlds of Fun and get Prowler, or I can get to, I can go to Kings Island and get Mystic Timbers, I think are maybe the comparisons you can make. But it's the fact that you don't have to go to all those places here. Europa Park has all of these things in one park,
all those things that you listed are things that I don't even really want.
That's fine, and that's an entirely different debate whether or not that's something you're interested in experiencing. But
Blue Fire doesn't really interest me. Silver Star doesn't really, like, these are not rides that I'm like, oh my god. And if you threw those rides, if you threw Mako into Disney World or Disneyland or Magic Kingdom, I don't think it makes that park any more or less special. I don't think it changes the dynamic there.
Okay, I think that's a fair assessment.
And I think my biggest problem is that the people who sit there and just heap praise onto Europa are the same people that won't even give the Disney parks the time of day. The same exact people.
That's where I really have the problem, right? Because I'm not sitting here defending the roller coaster collection of Europa Park as being the best in the world, because I don't think it is. And I'm not sitting here saying Europa Park isn't like Disney World or Disneyland, because it is. There are lots of similarities. Now, the way that it's executed in terms of the theming, like the countries versus the IPs in different areas of the lands, that's fine. It's different. It's fine. But the rides in general are inspired by a lot of Disney-type rides, which is fine. It's a good model. I've never once said that I don't like Disney. I don't go as often. It's expensive to go to. I don't go every time in Florida because it takes a lot of time to go.
How much was your ticket to Europa?
Europa Park, I think is like I think if you do the conversion, I think we found out it's roughly $45.
That's it?
Yep.
Well, that's why they got 12 million people. They're selling
Yeah, that's exactly right. No,
selling gold passes every day there, folks.
No, I think it's I think we did actually do a lot of the conversions, and I think it's somewhere between. I think it also depends on the time of year you go.
Speaking of the time of year, the thing that would get me to go to Europa Park, and the
Traumatic.
thing that does intrigue me, is their haunt event called Traumatica, which
well, they change their haunt event every few years.
And
so it used to be Horror Nights.
Absolutely fantastic. It's usually called Horror Nights Traumatica. It's like a whole title that they did. They just started the Traumatica theme, I think, like 2 years ago. But that looks like it is absolutely fantastic. They upped the little sex appeal there as well. And you get the haunted houses. They do a whole bunch of shows too. So that is the one thing that does intrigue me about Europa, is the fact that they look like they have a really fantastic haunt event there.
I had the conversion backwards. It's €55 currently for a summer 2020 Europa Park ticket, which is $61.
Yeah, so it's in line with like a Cedar Point ticket. A little bit more pricey depending on if you get a sale or not.
That's just whatever the advertised website price is, without any deals.
Everything you've said is all fine and good, but at the end of the day, people are like, "Oh, you need to get to Europa. You need to do whatever you can to get there," and I just don't see it. I don't see it.
And let's talk about the last two coasters, because then I'm going to make a few points. So Silver Star,
when you talking about Silver Star again?
Well, when you talk about Silver Star, it's a very strong ride, very much exceeded expectations because we had heard so many bad things about it. I think the airtime on it is very good. There's no trims, at least when we rode it. Apparently, people say they used to trim the hell out of it, which is maybe why people said it wasn't that good. But we did not get trimmed at all. There was some great airtime on the ride. There's a really good helix on it into a drop towards the end of the ride, and there's a really aggressive transition turn at the end. Overall, I mean, Silver Star to me is sort of right in the Diamondback category for me, which is a little bit lower than Mako. Silver Star doesn't have like a speed hill like Mako does. And I think Mako's airtime is pretty strong. Silver Star being a backseat ride, I think Diamondback's a backseat ride. I would put it over Intimidator. I would put it over Nitro. I would put it over Goliath at Laron. I would put it over Raging Bull. I would not put it ahead of Behemoth or a Mako. So that's for me. It's kind of like middle of the pack B&M hypers, but pushing towards the upper half. I think so. But it's generally, we thought it was going to be a weaker B&M hyper, and we thought it was slightly above the middle of the pack, which exceeded expectations. Surprised with Silver Star, so I didn't have any complaints about it in that regard. So then let's talk about Wodan Timber Coaster, which in my opinion is the best roller coaster they have there. And we talked, and again, this was number 3 on my most anticipated list and ended up being my favorite wood coaster of the entire trip. And I made the comparison because we rode Troy earlier in the week, and Troy was the ride that the first half had a lot of turns, and then the second half had a lot of airtime and a lot of speed and directional changes. And the feedback that I had heard and the discussions on Wodan Timber Coaster was, because it runs polyurethane wheels and not steel wheels, it burns off the speed faster. And even though it's big, it's 120 some feet and 60 some miles an hour, it burns off the speed faster and it doesn't feel as long as it should. And I understand where that's coming from. It certainly didn't feel as long as Troy. I don't think it is. It's shorter than Troy, I think, by a couple hundred. But I will say this. I felt as if Wodan Timber Coaster, so 35, 34 for Troy, and Wodan I think is just under 3,200, so it's 34, 45. Okay, so it's about 100 feet shorter. So Wodan to me ended at the exact right time because I didn't yet feel like, we're starting to slow down and we're losing momentum here, but you could tell that we were coming to the end. Wodan was the perfect length, in my opinion. And the airtime on this ride is very, very good. And it's got a few tunnels that are very, very good. And it's got some turnarounds and some turns and some lateral forces that are very strong. And it's got the station fly-through, which is very fun. And it's got a double up into the station fly-through. Its first drop goes underneath the station. Now, I am usually a back row guy on my I'm usually a back row guy on most of my GCIs, like Gold Striker, Thunderhead. I've always been a back row guy on those. Mystic Timbers, I've been a front seat guy. Even though you don't get the yank on the drop, I think Mystic Timbers is a front row ride. I thought Wodan Timber Coaster was very much a front row ride as well. Troy, I was a front row guy as well. But Wodan Timber Coaster, I think, was the best wooden coaster on the trip for sure. I've heard a lot of mixed things about Wodan. Some people saying it's too short. I wish there was more airtime. The airtime isn't that intense. I thought the airtime was plenty intense. I thought the airtime was very good and very strong, and I thought it was the perfect length. I didn't feel like it went on too long. I would love for any roller coaster to be longer as long as it could maintain its speed, but this is a ride that I think you get the absolute most out of it, what you're going to get. It's got a lot of airtime. It's got a lot of directional changes. It's got good laterals. It's got good scenery. It's got a couple good tunnels, station fly through. Already talked about a lot of these things, but, and it's butter smooth. The polyurethane wheels help this ride be butter smooth. It feels like a wood coaster, but you're not being banged around. It is the right type of feel that I like in my wood coasters. Wodan Timber Coaster took me by surprise tremendously in how much I liked it. I was really actually worried about this ride because Troy, I was like, boy, Troy was really, really good. I really, really liked Troy, but I really kind of hope that this ride's going to be better than Troy, and it was. And making all the comparisons to how Troy felt like two different rides that were smashed together, where you had a lot of turns and laterals in the first half and then the airtime in the second half. Wodan had the perfect mix of airtime, laterals, directional changes, and tunnels with sensation of speed. Wodan had the perfect mix and the perfect rhythm, everything that I want in a good wood coaster. And it's not quite in my top 10, but it's right there. I put it right in there, sort of nestled between rides like Rampage, Prowler, Troy, Renegade. It's sort of right in that group. That's the grouping I put Wodan Timber Coaster in. So that's kind of where I would put it. It's just outside my top 10 on the wood coaster list. And I said going in, I didn't know if I would have any wood coasters on this trip that made the top 10. I mean, that would have been a tall order. And I didn't, but I certainly didn't expect to have Wodan as high as it was, because currently I have Wodan and Troy at 14 and 15 respectively. I was very, very pleased with that.
You're a big wood coaster guy, though. So
I am a big wood coaster guy. I absolutely love Wodan. It was my favorite ride at the park.
Well, it's not hard to do.
You're awful. So I will say this, and we're talking about Europa Park here, and as a whole, I don't know, when you look at the Europa Park experience as a whole and looking back on it and having some time to reflect on it, just when we first got there, being in complete awe of the fact that we were there and the out-of-park experience, and then going into the park and riding the rides that we've seen pictures and videos of and we've heard about for all this time. And the roller coasters we knew about, and we knew what to expect out of a lot of the coasters, and most of the coasters were exactly what we thought they would be. Some of them were a little bit better than we thought, and that's great. And then we rode all these dark rides. We knew that there were tons of dark rides there. We didn't know what a lot of them were like. We knew that a lot of them were sort of, out of the Disney book, and that's what we got. And a lot of them were very impressive. That's, honestly, that's probably why the dinosaur ride was one of my favorites, because it wasn't an exact copy of anything Disney had. It was very unique to Europa Park in that regard, and it was just so weird and wonderful. For me, like I said, I feel like that would be your favorite ride at that park, for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, because I don't remember hearing you say anything negative about the dinosaur ride. You were talking about all those rides. You can't go somewhere else and get a dinosaur ride. But here,
at Universal Studios, there's a few dinosaur rides there.
So here is my overall thoughts. Like I said, the roller coaster collection is very good. It is not the best roller coaster collection in the world. I don't think it has collection in the world. I don't think it has to be.
I'm with you. To me, this roller coaster collection that you just described seems to be one of the weaker collections that we've talked about over this whole series.
Well, and that's kind of
on the whole.
And that's kind of what I alluded to at the beginning. I think you could make the argument that Haida Park has a better roller coaster collection and Wallaby Holland has a better coaster collection. I think those two parks for sure. You could definitely make a strong argument. You could even make the argument that Fantasialand, which has half as many coasters, has the better coaster collection between Terran, Black Mamba, Colorado Adventure, Vinjas. I think there are some very, very solid rides right there in terms of roller coasters. I would not disagree with anyone who said Europa Park did not have the best roller coaster collection on the trip, because I think that's a very fair point. And
I'd say anyone who said it had the best roller coaster collection is a complete idiot.
Well, I would again, overall, looking at balancing quality and quantity, I would say that it was probably not the best roller coaster collection on the trip. I would maybe lean towards Wallaby Holland. The only thing is they didn't have a wood coaster. Fantasialand for sure, but they didn't have a wood coaster. Haida Park has the wood coaster, and Colossus, they had the standout steel ride in Fleur de Démon, a good supporting cast in Croquet and Bobbin and Desert Race. I think there's some good stuff there. Ultimately, the Dark Ride collection is, if you're familiar with Disney, there's a lot of similarities there. So if you want to make the argument that there's not enough uniqueness, you can make that argument all day long. The fact of the matter is, while they have a lot of similarities, there are some unique ones. And even the ones that are similar are not IP-based, so you don't have as much familiarity. It's not like going to ride Battle for Metropolis at 6 different Six Flags parks where it's the same characters in the same order all the time. It's not that. So you do have some variation in that sense. You have the Snowflake ride, you have the Piccolo Mondo ride, you have the Dinosaur ride, you have the Atlantis Adventure ride, which those in terms of theme do not bear any similarities to their Disney counterparts. If you want to try and find counterparts, the shooting system on the Atlantis ride was similar to the Buzz Lightyear shooting system, but that's where the similarities end. So if you want to count ride vehicles, you can talk about B&Ms and Max and GCIs. You can talk about all that stuff, but I don't think that's really fair, because then every park does that. The Haunted Mansion's similar. The Flying Theater is very similar. You've got the geodesic dome, but there's a roller coaster in it. So it's sort of like Spaceship Earth meets Space Mountain, I guess, is sort of the comparison there. You've even got like a Jungle Cruise style thing with the rafts, right? You've got a lot of similarities. And that's okay, because those are some of the things that make Disney great in the opinions of most of your sane theme park people, because Walt Disney World and Disneyland and the Disney experience is one of the best in the entire theme park world that you can get. And there's a lot of similarities to this, and that's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. the operations of the park are top notch. The capacity of the rides is just absolutely through the roof. The customer service, we didn't have a single bad experience with any employees. They were all very friendly. Even the ones who didn't speak English, they have the flags on their name badge which tell you which languages they speak. Even the ones who didn't speak English that we asked a question to, they were able to help us. And they said it with a smile and said that they hope that we enjoyed our day. We had employees asking us because we looked very American wearing our roller coaster t-shirts and cargo shorts, asking us what we thought, and just talking to us in line while we're waiting in line. You have employees talking to you, which you don't get, so that sort of goes into it. The food loop experience, it wasn't just a cheesy way of giving you subpar theme park food. The food was good. The burger I had was excellent. The Black Forest cake was excellent. Some people had fish and chips, which was very good. I don't know what other people had. The food and drink selections were top notch. The Fanta made with real orange juice and not the stuff that we have over here. The orange Fanta is far superior in Europe. It's amazing over there, and that is like my go-to soft drink over there. The hotel experience, the projection show, the food outside at the hotel, the customer service at the hotel. It's not one particular thing. There wasn't one particular thing that stood out and said, that's what makes this the best park in the world. It was just the overall experience is one of the best. And I say is one of the best because, we've been waiting an hour and a half to hear this, but I will say this right now. Europa Park was not my favorite park on the trip. And I'm going to bury the hatchet here and say there is a reason that we've left Efteling to the end, because I will not argue with anyone who says Europa Park is their favorite park in the world or they think it is the best theme park experience in the world. That I will not argue with. If you want to talk about roller coasters, no. If you want to talk about, this and that, fine. But if someone said to me, I think Europa Park is the best all-around theme park experience in the world, I would never argue with someone who says that. Me personally, I enjoyed our day at Efteling more than I enjoyed our 2 days at Europa Park. And I'm not trying to knock Europa Park. This is a testament to everything that I experienced at Efteling and all the experiences we had at that park for a little over a day. We went a little bit the night before, and the hotel experience at Efteling and the theme park experience. And we will talk about that tomorrow, because that's why we've left that park till the very end, because I wanted to talk about Europa Park and talk about how great the experience at Europa Park, and how fulfilling the Europa Park experience was, and how it lived up to expectations in every way that I could possibly imagine, and the fact that I still liked something a little bit better on this trip to sort of give you something to look forward to tomorrow, because we've waited so long to give you this experience, and everyone's like, well, is Europa Park the best in the world? Is Europa Park the best in the world? I think it is one of the best theme park experiences in the world. I would not argue with anyone who says it is. Personally, I liked my experience at Efteling just a little bit more than Europa Park, and that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow.
Let's cut through the shit, Danny. Okay? Cut through the shit right now. You can only have one. Europa Park, all of it, combined, the whole kit and caboodle, or
Marineland.
Steel Vengeance. What do you take? What do you take? What do you take?
Am I taking Europa Park
The
or
whole
Steel Vengeance?
thing, I'm blowing one up, okay? One of them's getting the nuke, okay? Do you nuke Europa or do you nuke Steel Vengeance? Which one do? You got to pick one.
I'm going to piss you off when I say this.
Well, it's going to determine if we continue this show or not.
You blow up Steel Vengeance because you have the European Steel Vengeance and Untamed over at Wallaby Island.
Bullshit, you're an idiot. You're an idiot.
No,
this is why people like me better.
But I mean, and obviously the question that is going to come out of this is Europa Park or Cedar Point, right? That's the obvious question. That's always been the question.
I don't think that is the question to me. To me, everything you've said here is the question is, I would take one thing at Cedar Point over the entire Europa Park. One thing. I'll take Steel Vengeance. You give me that one thing.
I can't sit here and say that I can't sit here and say that one roller coaster.
Do you not remember riding Steel Vengeance 13 times in one day?
I do. I do.
Remember?
I do. Now no.
Would you trade that one day for your 2 days at Europa Park?
That media day experience is completely different because that's not the normal experience.
If you get Fast Pass, I've seen people ride 14 times in a day.
But you can't think about it that way. You can't say, "Oh, Steel Vengeance Media Day." You can't look at that because that's not the normal park experience.
I take one ride on Steel Vengeance over you. One. Uno.
But again, and
Danny, I'm not selling my grandmother to go there like I was told to by.
No,
I'm not selling anybody.
I'm not trying to convince anyone that they need to do that. But I mean, if you look at it from what is the better theme park experience or amusement park experience, I would say Europa Park. Now, if you're asking me personally, am I spending a day at Cedar Point or a day at Europa Park? Who's paying? I don't know, because it's
very free. Which one would you go to?
It's very easy for me to say Cedar Point because it's close by and it's got all the roller coasters, and I'm a big roller coaster guy, right? And they've got the best steel coaster in the world in Steel Vengeance. But then at the other hand, you've got everything that I look for in a well-rounded theme park experience at Europa Park. And I know that you don't like when people say
that you just ride and look at things. That's what you described to me. Dumb dark rides that you sit there and you go.
But they're not dumb dark rides.
They are dumb dark rides.
They're good dark rides. They're fun dark rides.
All the shit at Disney's are dumb dark rides. Like, you sit there on Snow White and you go through here.
See, this is why you can't trust him.
You sit there on Peter Pan and you look down at the buildings. Who gives a shit? Like, dumb dark rides. Like, let's cut through the shit. They're dumb dark rides.
No,
there's not even any boobs in them.
Well, no. Well, yeah. I mean, that is a fair point.
The only boobs are the ones saying that Europa's the best park in the world. Those are the only boobs you can see there.
It is personally, I would never argue with anyone who says Europa Park is the best park in the world. Personally, it is not my favorite. It is in my top 3.
I will argue with those people. Line them up. I'll argue with every single one of them.
It is in my top 3 of my favorite
parks. The same people
parks
that shit on Disney, that hate everything Disney does, are lining up to do whatever Europa does. Who gives a shit?
I would go to Europa Park over Disney World, and
You're insane to go ride mediocre roller coasters.
I can ride. Okay, so I get what? I get 2 or 3 roller coasters at Disney and all the dark rides, or I can have all the dark rides at Europa and get 13 roller coasters, 3 or 4 of which are pretty damn good. And Arthur?
Yes. And Arthur.
I don't know. I'm taking Europa Park over Disney, personally.
I don't know.
And Disney's 4 parks.
Disneyland. You're going to have
Disneyland in California is the only fair comparison you can make because
it's the only real comparison because Disney World, they broke everything up.
And I would go to Europa Park over Disneyland.
I would. Not with Star Wars, Rise of the Resistance.
Well, I can't say based off of that. I haven't been there yet.
I don't know. You listen to anyone that's talking on Twitter right now. And
if Rise of the Resistance is the best ride in the world, which it ought to be based on the money and the hype surrounding it, maybe my opinion will change. But as it currently stands with my most recent Disneyland experience, which I loved Disneyland. I love Disneyland California. I love that place so much. It is one of my favorite parks in the world. I would go to Europa Park over
Disney.
Disney.
That being said, Disneyland's still like number 6 on my list of favorite parks. Like, I'd rather go to Busch Gardens Tampa than Europa Park. Like, come on.
Oh no, I don't know about that.
You don't like Tampa? What the hell?
I love Tampa. I think Busch Gardens Tampa is a wonderful park. But I think Europa Park's the better overall park.
Ugh, okay, well, I guess.
So there you go. How long was that? That's got to be like an hour and a half. At
I
least.
don't know.
We talked a lot. So that's again Europa Park. Again, I mean we've been getting into a lot of discussion and debate here. But Europa Park is a fantastic experience. It lives up to all the expectations. It lives up to the billing of what people say it is. It is just a very, very it's an outstanding, well-rounded theme park experience. And if you decide to make a trip, that's exactly what you should expect out of it. You're going to get a little bit of everything. You're going to get a couple good coasters. You're going to get some good dark rides. Going to get great customer service. You're going to get good food, a good hotel experience. All of those different things that a place in Northeast Ohio maybe doesn't do as well.
I guess. I don't know. I guess.
The plumbing in our hotel worked, unlike a certain hotel in Ohio.
You don't know. You've only stayed there once. I've stayed there plenty of times.
I stayed there 3 times.
Like in every single time you've had issues with plumbing?
Twice we've had issues.
Well, that's understandable.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. Oh, and another thing, the rides that open early for the hotel guests were open on time.
Well,
we're open on time.
This is unfair, too.
Blue Fire opens at 9:30. It was open at 9:22 the one day, and Wodan opened at 9:50 when it's not supposed to open at 10.
So in fairness, if I said Cedar Point under Dick Kinzel, I lose Steel Vengeance, I lose Gatekeeper, I lose Valraven, but all the rides open on time.
See, now we've got a discussion. Now we've got something to talk about, my friend.
Cedar Point under Dick Kinzel. We'll take that.
Now.
You still have hotel issues then. So.
Now we've got a show topic. Because in its current state, I don't know that there's much of a debate.
Well, that's...
the Cedar Point experience has become increasingly frustrating over the last few years, I think.
Well, I don't disagree with that.
So, I mean, and that's the thing. I did not, over the course of an entire 2-day experience at Europa Park, I did not once feel rushed. And there were all these rides we had to ride, 13 coasters, just as many dark rides, and certainly some re-rides on our favorites. I mean, that's I mean, that is a lot to do. And I did not at any point feel rushed or frustrated or like I was disappointed with things. I mean, I found myself enjoying every part of our experience, which I cannot say the same about a lot of other parts. So, I mean, if nothing else, I think that's the main takeaway is I enjoyed every second of it, and I can't say that about a lot of other parks.
You're traveling with the wrong people, probably. So.
Yeah, you.
I certainly know you're traveling. I know the groups you travel with, and you're certainly traveling with the wrong people. There's no doubt about that. There's zero doubt about that.
Anyways, we got a little bit of banter in here at the end because we haven't had much of that. Because Andy not having been to any of these parks, he doesn't necessarily have a lot to chime in about. But I told him he needed to be more vocal in this one, and we need to have a little bit more controversy. But all joking aside, really, really loved Europa Park. Was everything I could have asked for, and I'm really happy that we finally got around to knocking these shows out. And
I feel like I want to be that guy that I'm going to refuse to go to Europa, just like some people refuse to go ride like Maverick and stuff. I think I want to be.
Oh my God! Yeah, seriously, you want to talk about blowhards, man? That's the guy right there. Those are the guys right there. But again, and I'm not trying to knock on Cedar Point either. Cedar Point is a wonderful park. They've got by far the best roller coaster collection in the world. It's one of my favorite places in the world to go to. They are very, very different, and I get 2 very, very different experiences out of those 2 things, and that's okay. That's if Cedar Point and Europa Park were exactly alike, there'd be no point in having 2 of them, right? So it is what it is. I enjoyed the hell out of Europa Park, and I
So if like Disney World and Magic Kingdom rank exactly the same, there would be no point in having two of them, which they're releasing.
well, and we've talked about that before too. So, but that's just the way that things fall. But hopefully you enjoyed hearing about all the ins and outs of Europa Park, 5 times in a row now voted the best theme park in the world by a certain group. But we will see. But I'm glad that we finally got to go through Europa Park, because I know people have been asking about Europa Park heavily here and have been waiting for this. So there you have it, and I'm really, really excited to explore all the ins and outs and tell you all about our experience at Efteling, which to me, just a little preview, to me, Europa Park was a great theme park experience. Efteling was much, I think, magical, much in the way that Disney likes to use the word magical. Efteling was a magical experience.
That will be coming up, coming tomorrow. So we will have to wait and see what you have to say. But to sign off here, I'm, of course, Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois.
And Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
And as always, ride on, Ride Warriors. Raptors better than all of Europa.
See you guys.